In September 1991, Steve Linnane was axed from the Newcastle Knights. His contract as a player terminated because the club said finances were tight.
Didn't give me any reasons as yet. I'm just obviously not wanted by the board and also more than likely coaching staff.
How things change. Linnane is now back with the red and blue. This morning at a news conference he was introduced as the club's new reserve grade coach. His coaching credentials in the Newcastle Rugby League are outstanding. He's taken the Bulldogs to premierships in 1993, 94 and 95, and this is another big step forward.
Yeah, it has always been a goal. Well, when I say always, probably when I started coaching 4 years ago, I set that goal and so I knew I had some sort of talent.
Linnane also brings with him a wealth of on-field experience. He's played more than 120 first-grade games as a cheeky and rugged halfback for Newcastle and St George. It won't be an easy task to emulate the Knights' reserve grade record. The club has lost several key players to the Mariners and will hold 5 trial matches early next year to drum up support.
The reserve grade team this year will be relatively young, inexperienced, and enthusiasm will be a major factor. I'm pretty sure that Steve can guide them in the right direction.
Linnane's at the helm for 2 years, although the contract will be reviewed after 1. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
The string of home invasions began last weekend when 2 elderly women were tied, gagged and robbed in their own home. Then houses near Newcastle in Whitebridge and Wallsend were targeted and the occupants bashed and robbed. Then the violence again in the coalfields, this time at a family home in Bellbird near Cessnock last night. A man watching television answered a knock at the door. The 40-year-old man answered the door of his Prince Street house and was immediately punched in the face. A struggle began and the man wrestled a replica pistol from his attackers. The victim's wife and 2 daughters were asleep inside the house at the time. Cessnock police say 2 men fled the scene in a large truck. But the spate of home invasions isn't a major concern to police, who say they're isolated cases and have happened for a reason.
There's no need to take up arms and cower in the corner waiting for someone to come bursting through the doors. It just won't happen. They do happen for a reason, and we are catching quite a few of them that are committing the offences.
For the past few years, Chandler Carter has been at the eye of the Atlanta Olympic Storm organising tourism promotion. In the Games wash-up, one thing became clear, especially for areas outside Atlanta.
It was kind of like having a party and nobody came.
The conference was told in the lead-up to the Games, regional areas of Georgia recorded only half the predicted growth in tourist numbers. During the Games, they were all but deserted. Officials blame the disappointing result on scaremongering about accommodation and the range of free on-site Olympic entertainment. The message to the local industry: take advantage of the opportunities at your doorstep.
Just by virtue of the fact that so many people are coming to Sydney, there are going to be some people that want to get out of town. And so, suggest to them that they come to the Hunter.
It's a message which struck a chord with local tourism bosses.
While we're certainly going to be chasing some of the international visitors, both now and in the lead up and beyond the year 2000, we're going to make sure that we don't forget our prime market in Sydney.
The conference was also the venue for the launch of a new $800,000 community awareness campaign, stressing the value of tourism. No group knows that more than the Central Coast Regional Tourism Organisation, which was today honoured with a State Tourism Award.
It was a repeat of last weekend's game against Canberra. Newcastle the better side for most of the early stages, but unable to finish off their hard work up the middle. The locals had the game in their control, but no matter how hard they tried, it just wasn't going right. Then after 18 minutes, the Cosmos delivered the real blow, Peter Bolgen making the most of the Breakers' defensive lapse to score the visitors first. 1-0, Canberra would have gone further in front if it wasn't for the fingertip save. Then the home side did attacking of its own, a neat 1-2, and Troy Halpin had only the keeper to beat to bring the match back to level terms. From there it appeared it would be a formality for Newcastle, and when they returned from the break, Glenn Sprott lofted a chip for a 2-1 lead. The charge continued a 5-minute blitz midway through the half at Canberra on the rails, but their keeper was rising and falling to the challenge. And then against the run of play, a cruel blow for the Breakers when the Cosmos equalised. The match finished 2-2, the Breakers scoring their third draw in a row. Shane Dye, the jockey, Miss Margaret paid $9.80 and $3 even. The fast finishing runner-up paid $2.90 and Headstrong paid $6.60. The Quinella $46.50 and the trifecta $2,595. Now to the other big race, the Queen Elizabeth Stakes, and a fantastic win for the Broadmeadow train for Lance. A great ride by Brian York. For Lance paid $4.70 and $2.20. The Places $4 and $2.20. The Quinella $31.60 and the trifecta $407.30. The mayoral duties were extended for John Kilpatrick this morning. An early rise to send off New South Wales and the ACT's best athletes for the Lake Macquarie Triathlon. The women were first away, their 500-metre swim to be followed by a 20-kilometre cycle and 5k run. A three-way battle up front between North Nowra's Erin Phelp and Sydney pair Hilla McGeechee and Christina Hauser. The men followed. All up, more than 300 raced the clock, with the leaders expected to finish on the hour. The cycle leg did its best to spread out the field, competitors tackling 2 5-kilometre laps, circling the lake and Argenton. Philp led the women, and while she held a 90-second lead going into the final leg, the challengers were closely behind. A lightning change for Christina Hauser helped her cause, the Kenthurst triathlete first to set chase. A pack leaders board also in the men's race. Joe Fitzpatrick, one of the first through, while Cronulla's Chris Lee was also up front. A brilliant 5-kilometre run by Hauser, and she hit the lead before finishing in 61.52. McGeechee overtook Phelp for second. The men's finish was thrilling. In the black, Luke Grattan had weaved through the pack to take the lead, but then one last plunge from Lee. Having already won the first 2 games of the series, the Eagles were on a high, but the Reds' pitcher was causing headaches for the locals. There were other hits as the home side smashed their way to a narrow 3-2 win in the opening match. But some sloppy play in the second ruined the good work as the visitors got home by 8. It was still a 3-1 series win for the Hunter Eagles. They play the Sydney Blues next weekend.
It may not look like much in its present form, but this imaginative design was enough to win 2 Year 6 students from Charlestown Primary first prize. The theme of their fountain is in keeping with its intended home.
We thought of honeysuckles and decided that we'd have honeysuckles in the middle.
Judges say they had a difficult time picking a winner, but settled on the entry from the Charlestown Primary students, struck by its level of sophistication.
You're never surprised with what young people can do, because I suppose in a way their minds are not polluted by sort of conventions, and so they come up with original ideas.
The design competition was run to coincide with the anniversary of completion of the Civic Park fountain, which 30 years ago created a storm of controversy. The designer's daughter hopes the new proposal will also stir debate.
Of course, art thrives on controversy.
Danielle and Brianna will now work with an architect and a professional sculptor to build a scale model of their fountain, which will then be presented to the Honeysuckle Development Corporation. Competition organisers are hoping the fountain may be built in time for Newcastle's bicentenary. Phil Hind, NBN News.
Justin Penfold hated the man his estranged wife lived with, so much so that in May 1995 he plotted to shoot John Purnell from this car park as Purnell sat in the lounge room of his North Haven house. Newcastle Court heard today that Penfold told a friend of his desire to shoot Purnell, and that friend told police. During 2 conversations with Penfold, the friend wore a listening device, and Penfold can be heard to talk openly about his plan to kill. In one conversation, he describes the murder. Mate, it's the simplest thing. Can you shoot a rabbit? Can you shoot a kangaroo? Right, where's the difference? Penfold planned to buy a high-powered weapon with money from the sale of his car. He contacted 23-year-old security officer Aaron Stiper of Edgeworth, who today pleaded guilty to conspiring with Penfold to possess an unlicensed firearm. When police searched Penfold's house, they found numerous items they believe were for the murder, including a balaclava, a set of altered registration plates, a telescopic gun sight, and papers detailing an intended alibi. Justin Penfold has pleaded guilty to proposing to murder John Purnell. Sentencing proceedings against he and Aaron Stiper will continue tomorrow. Jodie McKay, NBN News. Moves to provide the additional machine were made a year ago by the Minister for Health, Andrew Refshaugi. $1.7 million later, the hospital's third linear accelerator is up and running.
It's been a long struggle. We've been canvassing and supporting this for over 3 years now.
Accelerators are used to bombard areas of a cancer patient's body with radiation. The latest technology is a welcome addition to the hospital's oncology unit, which treats more than 1,200 patients a year.
And to treat our first patient this morning, I think the staff got a great deal out of it, and certainly now people feel that it's a vision that's been realised.
Vanessa Spark, NBN News.
It's this 68 horsepower 700cc jet ski which could be the future of beach rescues along the coastline. Newcastle City Council has come up with $10,000 for the jet ski, which can be launched from the beach in seconds. The craft is being trialled at Newcastle beaches in the lead up to summer. It's the jet ski's pace that's impressed beach inspectors, who say it can travel between Nobbies and Merriweather in less than 5 minutes.
So that's excellent, and you won't get a quicker time than that. And that was in a sea condition, so we're very impressed with it. And as I said, I can't fault it in any way. I think it's going to be the new age of rescues for the future.
The jet ski will be used mainly for out-to-sea rescues and replace the more sluggish rubber duckies.
It's more accessible for one person to use. It's a lot quicker and responsive in the water, and by far more powerful and easier for us to handle the waves.
Beach inspectors are now appealing for a four-wheel drive buggy to make launching the jet ski more effective.
More than 70 men from the Pelton and Ellalong collieries spent 5 hours this morning combing thick bushland south of Bellbird. The miners concentrated their efforts over a 4 square kilometre area but found no trace of the missing man.
Pretty rugged area, I must admit. However, we've come up with a nil result at this stage.
49-year-old David Heaney was reported missing on Friday. He hasn't been seen since last Wednesday after he wandered away from his former family home.
His workers are very concerned for him because he was in a depressed state when he went, and they just organised a private search to see if they can help the family out.
Friends describe Mr Heaney as an experienced bushman. However, it's believed he didn't take enough provisions to survive a week in the bush. Fears are now held for his safety.
It's basically formed out mined area, and with the subsidence in that area it's quite dangerous. However, apart from that, just very thick bush.
These workers will return at first light tomorrow morning to resume the search for David Heaney. The search effort will also be widened with the involvement of the State Emergency Service. Phil Hind, NBN News. The Home and Community Care Conference attracted almost 200 representatives from organisations as diverse as Meals on Wheels and Community Nursing. It's these groups which make it possible for the elderly and infirmed to live in their own homes.
Service providers are feeling very stressed. I think we have a great concern for the clients who aren't coping, and particularly for their carers.
It's estimated in the Hunter, half of those needing services aren't receiving all the help they require. Many blame a shortfall in state government funding. Coupled with moves to restrict nursing home beds, HACS forecasts demand for services will grow by 3% a year. One solution being put forward is a shift more towards a user pays system.
Under the National Fees Policy, nobody that needs a service will be refused because they can't pay. But there are people who can afford to contribute to the services. Many do already.
It will be left to the state government to decide exactly who pays and how much.
The Western Suburbs Leagues club is the richest in the NRL and at one stage looked like joining the Mariners under the Super League banner. The biggest meeting in the club's history forced the club to drop the idea and General Manager Bob Ferris to quit and take up the top job at the Mariners. But there's now accusations a West Mariners merger is back on track.
I just hope there isn't a hidden agenda there, which really stinks of that at the moment.
It follows West's move to get the Newcastle Rugby League to quit the Knights Board of Directors, where the NRL holds 4 of the 9 positions. But the NRL rejects the suggestion that its directors have a conflict of interest, which deprives the local competition of sponsorship dollars.
And all our sponsorship is actually tied up for a couple of years.
The matter goes to a full meeting of the Newcastle Rugby League later this month. West needs 3/4 of clubs to back the withdrawal from the board. The NRL says that's extremely unlikely. The Mariners say they're certainly not behind any proposal. The Knights have made no comment, and Western Suburbs didn't return our calls. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
By the time fire crews arrived on the scene, the semi-detached house in Bruce Street was well alight, smoke billowing from a rear window. Fire crews wearing breathing apparatus fought the blaze. After half an hour it was under control. Still smouldering and thick with smoke, fire crews feared someone may have been inside the house. Smoke was blown from the house with the brigade's newest tool, a turbo fan that clears a path for firefighters. Fears were then confirmed.
Firefighters wearing breathing apparatus searched the cottage and found the body of the occupant in the back room of the house.
Police believe the woman may have suffocated in her sleep. Fire investigators interviewed the woman's neighbours in an attempt to determine the cause of the blaze. It's believed the house was not fitted with smoke alarms. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
It was always going to be tough for Hamilton Wickham at Passmore Oval today. Set 375 for victory. The home side started well enough, and at lunch it was 3 for 106. But a great spell from Charlestown quickie Peter March rocked Hamwick's foundations. 2 quick wickets had the locals on the rails. Todd Campbell dismissed for 1. Steve Spoljaric provided some resistance. He knocked up consecutive 4 shy of tee to edge towards his 50. Hamilton Wickham was hanging on, but the target was just too far away. Charlestown winning by 113 runs. And at Cardiff number 1, nothing between the home side and Lambton New Lambton early on in their rain-reduced limited overs match. Cardiff needed 166 from its 55 overs for victory, and at drinks it was 2 for 37. David Willis and Jason Vero made some effort at a partnership before Lambton bowler Brad Bannister turned the tables, the wicket of Willis. Then 1 ball later, that of Brett Neller. 4 for 51. Martin Trisley skittled the stumps in the next over to put Cardiff in even bigger trouble. The tail enders left with a mammoth task to save the game. The high-powered engines have rocked Budgie Lake for the last 4 days. Competitors from the United States, New Zealand and dozens from the east coast of Australia joining for the Toukley Aquatic Club's American Racing Carnival. The conditions were far from ideal in today's finals. Choppy water made the skiers work hard over the entire 5-kilometre course, but the leading men and women still reached speeds in excess of 100 kilometres an hour. Mixed results for the international visitors. The US finished last in the feature event, the Team Shield. It will be taken home by the the Kiwis. A miserable day for the state's best wave sailors. They were due to hit the surf in the fourth round of the New South Wales titles at Soldiers Beach, but the only aerobatics was on the sand. Calm conditions this morning gave organisers no choice but to abandon the meeting. The sailors now travel to the south coast for the final round of the championships next month. At the Newcastle International Motordrome, American speedster Tim Fuller has fulfilled high expectations by blitzing his rivals in the modified challenge. The 28-year-old from New York showed no signs of giving in to Australia's best drivers. He set a cracking pace to win both the Stars Dash and the feature 20-lap final. A much closer tussle in the Super Sedans. Robert Carrick, John Brown and John Pine duelled for the lead in each of the heats. Carrick won the first, Pine the second.
It's scenes like these that prompted police to form Newcastle's Task Force Allenby, a special group to deal with the rise in crime in the region. So far, they've arrested 18 people in relation to 63 charges.
And these charges range not only from the armed robberies but through to home invasions and serious assaults, etc. So they're covering the range and they are getting good results.
Their latest major move has been on two men who were arrested over an attack on an 80-year-old digger last week. As well as focusing on arrests, police have encouraged local businesses to play their part in the fight against crime.
By talking to them and getting good reception from the businesses, we've been able to get better information as a result of some of these offences, which has then led to the arrests.
Vanessa Spark, NBN News.
The Breakers flew into Belmont this morning, disappointed at last night's result against the NSL cellar dwellers. The side was looking to break its run of 3 consecutive draws, but they weren't intending to do that with a loss. It was a familiar story in the heart of South Melbourne. The Breakers the better side, but unable to convert.
You know, we could have walked away from there winning by 4 or 5 goals. Same as last week. It's a common tale at the moment. It's a bit annoying, to be honest.
It was a match the Breakers should have won. The Lakers entered the game languishing on the bottom of the ladder, Newcastle buoyed by recent strong performances. But after 26 minutes, the home side gave its supporters something to cheer about, Ivan Kelic finding the net. The pitch may have left a lot to be desired, but the Breakers soon found their footing and looked set to bounce back. On the edge of half-time, the visitors were presented with 3 chances in quick succession, but the problem that's been plaguing the side in recent weeks haunted them again. They failed to break through. The match finished 1-0, the Lakers scoring their first win this season.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll be honest, I haven't got a clue. I can coach guys to get in to goal-scoring positions, and we do enough finishing at training, but what happens after that is another issue altogether.
The side will have a practice game tomorrow night in the lead-up to Friday's clash against Collingwood.
We have to turn the corner and, the chances will go in and we'll start winning games.
The only victim of the wild weather was a 21-year-old motorist forced to pull off the Pacific Highway near Tea Gardens after a tree blocked the road. Gregory Beattie died after a second tree came crashing down across the roof of his small car. In Dungog, the 2 occupants of this hilltop home narrowly escaped injury after cyclonic winds lifted the house off its foundations and sent it crashing back to earth, breaking its spine. State Emergency Service crews from across the Hunter region were called in as local resources were stretched to the limit.
At least 30 homes, and we're still receiving some more damage as of this morning as well.
Worst affected were houses on the hills surrounding Dungog. At one house, flying sheets of wrought iron from a nearby shed tore almost half the roof off the family home.
It just flew across the house and hit the tiles, and then that's what knocked them off, and then it went down the road about 100 metres.
The storm, which hit the town just before 7:30 last night, was part of a large storm cell stretching all the way from Moree to the Hunter Valley. Residents describe the storm as a mini cyclone.
I mean, I had all the windows open in the house because it was so hot, and then all of a sudden, the house was falling in.
Dungog spent the night without electricity. North Power crews were kept busy this morning erecting new power poles and lines to restore supplies to hundreds of homes. In the wake of the storm, the local council is to pressure government to look at electricity supplies.
We need adequate backup power supplies, particularly for our emergency centre.
The Mayor says money for an emergency power supply allocated in 1994 is yet to be received.
As we can.
You'll promise that?
You could have been forgiven for thinking it was the middle of the league season at Bar Beach today. Blustery winds coupled with the odd shower hardly suggested this was pre-season summer training. The New Look Knights held their first session for the new season this afternoon. The club has lost a number of players to the Hunter Mariners, but that did little to dampen the enthusiasm. The Knights will face a new battle in 97, homegrown competition, and the players believe the best performing team on the park will win Newcastle's support.
The supporters really want to see a side that's going to be winning, not coming last or aren't improving. So it's going to be the side that's going to be on top and making the performances.
Already focused on improving their on-field efforts next year, Coach Malcolm really led the side for ball skills training, while some of the other players were still in holiday mode. The Knights start the Australian Rugby League season with a home match against St George on Sunday the 16th of March.
Contaminated water in developing nations like Zaire has been blamed for the deaths of thousands of refugees. Water supplies in remote areas of Australia have also been known to carry deadly diseases. Purifying this vital substance has become Paul Barleveld's project.
We perhaps become complacent in cities because we have very good water supplies, but when we go out into some remote rural areas and into developing countries, there are many parasites and bacteria in the water supply that can cause severe infection.
Paul has been given a Defence Reserve's Prince of Wales Award to study the purification of water supplies with the US Army. His research will concentrate on the control of protozoan parasites.
Most organisms in the water, like bacteria, we can control by simple chlorination, but we have to use very special treatment measures to control these protozoan parasites.
Paul hopes his current work as a scientific officer with the Army Reserve will be of benefit, along with his research with the University of Newcastle. He leaves for the United States next July. Vanessa Spark, NBN News. Ray and Marilyn Lloyd have had to cope with far too much grief. They lost their youngest child to cot death. Their 16-year-old son hanged himself. And in April, 21-year-old Matthew, who was struggling to deal with his brother's death, walked off a cliff in Newcastle. Why both sons killed themselves will haunt them forever. Today in Newcastle Coroner's Court, they were trying to find answers to Matthew's death.
But he was very sick and he needed a lot of help, just as much as anyone with cancer needs help.
When Matthew was admitted to Newcastle's James Fletcher Psychiatric Hospital, he was suffering deep depression. The type of care he required wasn't available in Taree. His parents now believe he did not get the care he needed at James Fletcher either. 2 days after being admitted to intensive care, he was moved to a regular ward. That allowed him to walk from the hospital and over a nearby cliff. The police were told of his disappearance 40 minutes after he was noticed missing. By that time, Matthew had been dead at least 2 hours. A report to police shows hospital staff were aware of Matthew's condition. It says Matthew is a depressed man, has been to the cliff before and is suicidal, yet he was free to walk out of the hospital.
There should have been a lot more security at the time.
And a lot more care of...
A lot more care of the patients.
Matthew Lloyd was one of 10 patients from James Fletcher who have either contemplated or committed suicide from these cliffs surrounding the hospital. It's such a concern to Newcastle Police that they have asked hospital management to tighten security, and that was reiterated today by Coroner Michael Morahan.
But if they had done the right thing by Matthew and us, we would have still had him.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.